Collective Whisper Podcast with Simon K. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Collective Whisper Podcast. I'm your host Simon K and welcome to the show. We hope you're all good and enjoying life, and we have an amazing guest for you today. But before we get to that guest, once again, please subscribe, share the show, give us a review, let us know your thoughts. Thank you very much. So let's move on to today's guest. Today we are deeply honored to be joined by Kathy Kleiner Rubin, a woman whose story is nothing short of extraordinary. Kathy is a survivor in every sense of the word. In January 1978, as a college student at Florida State University, Kathy was attacked by one of history's most infamous serial killers, Ted Bundy, during his brutal rampage at the Chi Omega sorority house. While Bundy tragically claimed the lives of two of Kathy's sorority sisters that night, she and her roommate survived the attack. A miracle that has inspired countless people. It was a moment that would forever alter her life, but it didn't define her. Kathy's journey of survival didn't begin or end with that harrowing night. Diagnosed with lupus at just 13 years old, Kathy learned very early on what it means to fight for her life. Later in her 30s, she faced yet another battle, stage 2 breast cancer. Through it all, Kathy has shown unwavering strength, refusing to let these challenges dictate her life. Now, as an author and advocate, Kathy is using her voice to amplify the stories of victims and survivors, ensuring they are no longer overshadowed by the myths and media narratives surrounding violent perpetrators. Her memoir not only recounts her remarkable journey, but also offers valuable advice on how to support trauma survivors, emphasizing compassion, understanding, and the power of resilience. In this episode, Kathy opens up about her childhood in a close-knit Cuban-American family, her experiences with Bundy's attack, her battles with chronic illness and cancer, and her mission to honor the voices of women who have been silenced. This is more than a story of survival. It's a testament to the human spirit and a call to action for all of us to listen, learn, and uplift. So settle in, join us for this powerful and inspiring conversation with Kathy Kleiner Rubin. You don't want to miss it. Welcome, Kathy Kleiner, to the show. Great to have you here.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
So, Kathy, you're in South Florida, and have you lived there all your life? Because I know you're of Cuban heritage.
We moved to a couple states, and recently we moved here from New Orleans, which I lived there with my husband for 18 years.
That's really nice. New Orleans is a lovely place, and I'm sure Florida is a lovely place. Before we get into the main story and a lot more things in your life, just tell us a little about your childhood growing up in that Cuban family. So you were like a Cuban-American family. What was life like for you?
It was very interesting. It felt normal. My parents didn't want me speaking Spanish, so I guess I'm the first generation with my sister and brother to be only English. Growing up, I used to go to the Keys here in Florida, and I would be with my grandparents for 3 months during vacation. And I could always understand what they were saying, but I couldn't react to them without being in broken Spanish. So it was okay. I loved it. Being around the family are so loving and so giving. It was a great way to grow up.
And then things took a turn for you at 13. Then you were diagnosed with lupus. Was that something as a teenager for you that was very difficult? Because it's hard. You're becoming a different person, and all of a sudden you're diagnosed with an illness. So it's very hard to be normal around everybody else, isn't it? Because you're facing a battle.
I was diagnosed with lupus at 13. They didn't know what it was. I went to a doctor's appointment, and they put me in the hospital for 3 months. And I stayed there. They ran all kinds of tests, but they didn't know what was wrong at that point. There was a doctor who offered experimental chemo because he thought it was lupus. So I was taking that during 7th grade. I lost all my hair, and I was homebound. And all I could do was see the kids outside playing. And sometimes I would get so lonely, I would call 0 just to talk to the operator. But I knew I didn't want to live like this. And my parents were always scared and upset and just had so much angst for me that they didn't know what they could do to help me. And I wanted to take that away from them. So I acted as normal as I could. After the chemo, I wanted to move on. I wanted to go out and play and look forward to school. And I joined theater, the drama club, and I learned I could act and be anyone I wanted to be, except that sick little kid that was homebound in 7th grade with no hair.
Wow. I think in some ways like that, when you are that age, you do need something else to take your mind off something that's so heavy and it's so hard on your life. So like you said, you wanted to become everything else but that sick little kid. And did you feel that time that you managed to do it? Did you feel that you were able to overcome the sickness just by your positive mental attitude?
Yes, I do. I think those 4 years in theater, I made friends. I'm still in touch with a lot of them. So they didn't know my history. They didn't know I was sick with lupus. I was just another kid in class, and I loved it.
Wow, okay. And then as you grew older and you decided then you were going to go to Florida State University.
I lived in Florida, and my parents wanted me to use my in-state tuition money. So I did look at a couple other schools, and I looked on a map and I saw that Tallahassee was as far as I could get away from Miami and still get in-state tuition. So that was my big push to go to Florida State.
Right, I understand. And was that something that you felt because you were in Florida State and you were closer to home? In some ways, maybe you felt less exposed to the big bad world and maybe closer to home as well.
I was put into the world, but I loved it. I had like 60 sorority sisters. I lived in the sorority house. I still had friends outside the sorority, and it was great. I was looking forward to everything that was happening and everything to happen to me.
Right. And for people in Europe, when we look at sororities and fraternities and all of these things in American colleges and universities, they're different because the European universities and the United States universities have a different kind of approach to things. But did you feel that time when you were in a sorority that because of sexism and because of being pretty and being all of these things, did you feel that even for the boys on the university that you could be targets? Because in essence, I suppose what turned out, you became targets, the girls in that sorority, but not from the usual suspects. So was it hard being in a sorority and feeling that kind of glare all the time?
I did not. I think the students at Florida State back in 1978 were very casual, and the guys were always nice, and atmosphere to grow up. I had no thoughts of trauma. I was joining frat parties and, going to class. So I was in a good state of mind.
So that evening when January 1978, before that event happened, did you have a normal routine you were doing, or was there anything out of the ordinary for that evening? That night really changed your life forever. So can you just tell us about the build up that evening? What happened? What were you doing your normal thing before the event actually occurred? What was your normal routine in the evening?
Actually, on Saturday, the 14th, I had gone to a wedding of some friends. And after the wedding, we went to some friend's house and had a potluck dinner. It was about 8:30 or 9. I decided to go home because I had a calculus test on Monday. And I thought I should at least open the book and see what it might be about. So I was in my room studying as well as my roommate. And it was around 11:30 that she and I decided to turn off the lights and go to sleep. So that Saturday, there was nothing unusual. It's something we always did. But at night on January 14th, it became January 15th in the morning. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I had gone to bed, lights were off. Our room was a dormitory size. And on each wall, we had a desk, a dresser, and at that end was my footbed to the twin bed we had. The back wall had a bank of windows that were beautiful and let the sun shine in during the day. And we always had the curtains open because we had plants hanging on the rods. So that night, we didn't know, but on the morning of January 15th at 3 in the morning, someone was stalking the back of the sorority house lot. He came through the sorority house, went up the stairs. He saw her and again went to her side of the room and attacked her with the same club, but he didn't kill her. Now I'm awake and moaning, and he crosses the room again to attack me. We didn't know, but it was Ted Bundy, and Ted Bundy never left a victim alive. So as he came to my side, I'm in a ball as small as I can be because I thought if he couldn't see me, he wouldn't kill me, but he did come across the room. And I saw him raise his hand up again with that oak wood. But all of a sudden, there was a bright light that came through our open curtains through that window. And as it did, I could see him more clearly now. And he became really, really antsy, kind of just stood there and got antsy. And he didn't know if the light from where it was coming from saw him or if I saw him more clearly. So he ran out of our bedroom door and down and out of the sorority house. And now I'm in my little ball and I'm hurting and I'm waiting for someone to help me.
What a night and what a story. And I'm sure you've gone over that story. You've told that story many times. Now, when you look back, and I know tomorrow is the anniversary, does that story still feel surreal or unreal to you when you think about it in your head?
When I think about it, it was unreal, but I didn't let it attack my feelings and my heart and my soul. So I was a victim one night. And then after that, I wanted to become a survivor. And I did by moving on and mentally and physically healing. And back in 1978, they didn't have therapists to help with trauma victims. And or if there were, I didn't know about them. No one approached me. So at that point, I had to deal with getting better and having my jaw wired shut for 9 weeks and also mentally recuperating.
The other thing, I suppose, when you have someone like Ted Bundy and he never left his victims alive, did you have fear then that there would be repercussions from this or that they wouldn't catch him? Because I don't know how long it took you to realize it was Ted Bundy after the fact. Like, when did they tell you it was Ted Bundy?
It was a couple weeks later, and he was actually arrested in Pensacola, Florida, which is on the top of the state. And he was leaving the state when he was apprehended by a officer for a traffic violation. So he was actually found out very surprisingly. And he told the officer that he was a student. And by the time they took him back to Tallahassee, the police officers and the Ken Casares, the sheriff, put together what he had done in Colorado and the West and put it together that this could be their guy. But it took a couple weeks for me to find out.
That night, when we talk about the car headlights and them coming through the window and that moment when something actually changed, because you could have just been another victim. You were a victim, but you could have been a victim who couldn't tell their story. So when those headlights spooked Bundy and saved your life, has that moment, how does that feel to you? Did that feel like that was just divine intervention? Did it feel like it was fate or faith? What did it feel like it was to you when you look back on it?
I do feel divine intervention. I know that car came in at that moment to drop that sorority sister off. And it was put together that happened for me and saved my life. And I feel that I have all the faith in the world. And I do believe that a lot of me thinks it was faith as well.
Right. And when you look back on that moment when those headlights spooked him, did he look at you?
I didn't have my glasses on. And all I could see was that dark figure because he was dressed in dark clothes. So I didn't focus in on him. I couldn't identify him because I never really saw his face. But I wish I had. I wish I had seen his face so that I could help during the trial. But it's not seared into me. I just don't go there. It's not something that I think about.
Because you were one of the only survivors of his attacks, then were the police relying on you a lot and maybe there was information you couldn't actually give them because you didn't see him properly? But I'm sure they were looking at you like, well, she's our only hope now.
My mouth was wired shut for 9 weeks, and the detectives were at my bedside asking me questions, and I couldn't answer, and I had to write down, I don't know, a lot on the notepad, but I felt bad I couldn't help them. They're like, sure, you can help them, So they actually hypnotized me in the hospital, and they thought I could come out with more than I thought I could. While they did that, I explained everything the way I did, and that I'm like thinking, I'm not, that didn't happen, but in my mind, it did happen. And that brings me to a closure that I know exactly what happened. And I know that was my bed and my wall, and there was blood on it and stained blood. And I knew exactly what happened.
Yes. And I know that your parents took you out of university then. So was that something as well that really affected you? Because I know you had those 9 weeks of your jaw being wired shut, but then you had to reevaluate your whole life again, didn't you? And you had to think, do I want to continue in university? Do I want to come back? I'm sure it was a very harrowing time for you mentally, even in the years after.
Yes, one of the things right after the attack was I was afraid of men. I was sensitive to people men I didn't know. I wasn't like everyone's going to attack me. I was just uncomfortable. So I got a job at a lumber yard because I figured I could see the most men. I was a cashier in the shortest amount of time to help me overcome this. And I learned there's a lot of cute construction workers out there that buy things in lumber yards. And I
Yes,
got over that feeling that, hey, they're not all going to hurt me. So I stopped working
yes.
there. It was only about 3 weeks until I overcame that issue in my life. And, you know, I'm fine now with people I don't know.
And that was very brave of you, because I like to think in life that sometimes when we have a fear, you have to just face it head on. And I think that was a really brave thing you did by going into a kind of male environment, especially after what had happened, and to kind of say, well, I'm going to expose myself. Not every guy is bad, but even when I do meet some guys who are sexist or aren't the most respectable, I learn to deal with them a little. So that was a great move.
Thank you. I used little things like that to help move on from Bundy. I felt like there was this black mass behind me and that it was going to catch me and take me. So in my head, I looked out way out in the distance, and the ocean was one little island with a sand chair. And I took baby steps to go to that island. I wanted to reach it, and it took me a long time in little baby steps. And halfway through, I looked around, and that mass, that terrible thing, were baby steps behind me. And as I approached the island, I finally sat down, put my toes in the sand, and looked up, and all that was in front of me now was bright light. And I had shed another feeling away from me that, life's good, life's great. There's a light in front of me, and I'm going to go for it.
Yes. And a lot of your book and a lot of the message you're trying to send about Ted Bundy was that the media portray him as this charming killer. And the truth is, when I've looked back over the years and things would come up about Ted Bundy, they always would say the handsome killer, and that was part of his appeal. There would be people who would think he was dreamy or that he was cute and all of these, but I can imagine for those victims, those women, when they meet somebody who seems cute and a handsome guy, and for him then to turn into this monster is nearly twice as hard to fathom. It's twice as hard to believe. But they seem to focus on Ted Bundy as being this handsome, charismatic guy, which he probably was, but he had the heart and mind of a monster, didn't he?
He was truly a monster. He never was charming as much, and I don't think he was extra good looking. He was very slow. He had problems in school. He went to college. It took him 8 years to get his master. And then he went to law school, and he dropped out of the first law school because it was too much for him to handle. And he went to the second law school and failed. And he wasn't that intelligent. He didn't have focus enough and insight enough to try to concentrate to go to law school. So at that point, he wasn't intelligent, and he wasn't someone that approached people and say, hey, girl, follow me, or hey, just want to go get coffee. He actually only approached a couple women and acted like he had a cast in his arm and that he needed help to do something. And one or two of them followed. One of them got the way, and the other one was killed because of it. And he always attacked women from behind. And he would attack them with a tire iron, put them in his car, and then take them out to the woods. And he killed 36 women during that time. He forced them into his car, and he would go into rooms at night and kill them in their bed and then take them in his car to the woods. And that was his MO. He wasn't someone that was overly protective of himself. He didn't have a lot of things that were good to him in his head. And he never approached, if a man was anywhere near where he was approaching a woman, he would back away and go the other way, just so no one would see him approaching. I don't think he was one that could stand up for himself and go ahead and do a the attack face to face.
Right, and that's just the media spin, isn't it? Because they have created this character who sometimes when you watch or think about Pablo Escobar, the people they've killed for money and drugs, they've painted Ted Bundy a bit like this too, because they would say, yeah, he's done this on one hand, but this is how clever he was and he was very charming. So we as viewers, we've always seen these kind of narratives being spun, and it's totally wrong, isn't it?
Like I said, he wasn't charismatic. He wasn't anything special. He couldn't hold a job. He pickpocketed and stole his clothes. He was just a loser in life. And this thing in his head, as he grew up, he had issues. He would be look in people's windows as a peeper. He would kill animals and all these things that led up to what he really was. And that was wicked. That was in him. I think he was born like that. But he didn't care who he killed or how he killed them. He just had to feel that lust in himself. And it wasn't so much for a sexual feeling, it was a domination. He wanted to feel that he possessed the women and that he had his power over them, and that was his driving force. And the women he killed, like I said, was 36 of them. And in my book, I talk about all of them. I name them and I give them who they were and what they were doing and a little bit of their life, because he stole everyone's lives. They were so young, and so he stole them way too soon to take them from us in this world. And I wanted to make sure that they were known and that he was not the most important figure in the story, that they were.
And that's very good. You did something that a lot of media outlets and other books haven't done as well in the past. You've highlighted who the victims were, you've shown their side of the story, so we commend you for that. And one question I want to ask you, during the years then, or after that event happened and you came to terms with it, and you got your therapy and you dealt with the trauma, maybe was there ever a part of you that wanted to visit him in prison, look him in the eyes face to face?
I didn't want to give him any more of my mental or energy. There's nothing I wanted, the obvious things I would say, but I didn't feel like I had to stand in front of him and say. As mama being a Cuban, she goes, just give me 5 minutes with my high heel shoe and I'll take care of that. Right. She just, she was a dog to go after him, but I didn't need to. I saw him twice during the process, at the trial and again at the deposition. And he just looked like a creep to me, and he was trying to be charismatic, and he just wasn't. I didn't need to waste any more time on him.
And I want to get to the trial in a second, but before that, I just want to ask you, that night he was hanging around the campus, but you were all asleep. Had you ever, in hindsight, ever seen him hanging around there before, or any of the bars there?
There were a couple sightings of him, mostly by the sorority house. There was a bar that was close by, and it was open late, like 2 a.m, and it was a party joint. The kids got together, drank beer, dancing, played darts, so it was a normal type of bar on a college campus. And so he was sitting there and tried to dance with some of the women, but he was like 32 now. He wasn't the typical 18 to 20-year-old, frat guy. He stood out in that crowd. And a couple women danced with for like one dance or so and went back to the table and said, man, that guy feels like a jaybird. I was not comfortable at all with him. I felt like he was a con or something. So for women to also pick up on that was something, intuition that they had that was good for them.
Okay, I can understand. And then when we look at the trial, so you had to give a deposition. Did the police just want you to make a statement? And did you get a choice when you could start or you could go up to testify? How was the whole process?
I was subpoenaed, so I had to go. And of course, I was nervous and anxious. I was in Miami, and they flew me up to Tallahassee for the actual deposition. And as I entered that room, it was a conference room, and there was a long conference table. And the defense sat on one side, and the prosecution sat on the other side. And down at the end was Ted Bundy. And he just looked at me, and I sat down, and I stared him down. I don't even remember the questions I was asked because I just stared at him. And I didn't want him to think I was afraid or that he bothered me. I just wanted to know that he wasn't bothering me, that he was just terrible, and I didn't want to give any fear out. So I just stared him in a positive fashion.
Okay, and as the trial went on and then the verdict, how did that feel for you? Because you knew he was guilty and everyone knew he was guilty, but unfortunately, sometimes there can be miscarriages of justice in the wrong way and the right way. So, was there a fear in you that he wouldn't get convicted at any stage?
No, I knew he would get convicted. I knew he did this. And I think it was such a sense of the whole community knew he did this. There weren't many people that said no, that he didn't. So it was a group community. And I think we all felt he was guilty. During the trial, a lot of things came up that proved that he was there and that what he did. And it was my turn to testify. And he sat at the table in the courtroom. And I don't remember the questions other than the defense asked me, was this the man you saw in your room that night that attacked you? And I had to say, I don't know, because I didn't recognize him full on without my glasses. And that's always hurt me that I couldn't have said, yes, he was there and helped close the case against him. So I deal with that, but I know that I was there and that I was his victim, and the prosecution told everything about what happened that night to me.
Did you think that, the families and the families of the victims rather who were there, do you felt that they were ecstatic? And because it's a very hard thing, isn't it? I mean, you're there, you want justice, but at the same time you've lost your family member and you've lost your daughter and whatever. So it's a very traumatic thing and very terrifying thing for all of those families to go through in that court case, even, no?
Yes, and I don't know, but I can imagine that it wasn't an ecstatic yay. It was more of a finally, or I know he did it, and maybe my daughter can be at rest now. I think it was a solemn time for them that they reacted in their own way. And I think a lot of them just felt that their child, their daughter, could be maybe laid at rest now.
Right, okay. And, moving on then, like after that whole event and after everything that happened, so you started kind of helping other people as well, through your books and everything. So, what do you think, as a trauma survivor, what was one of the most important things you learned in your journey to help you survive life after that?
One night I was a victim, and the next day I was a survivor. And I had to go through times of sad and mad and hatred. I had to go through all those feelings. But I knew I didn't want to live like that. And instead of putting myself in a little room and feeling sorry for myself, I opened the door and I walked out. And every day I was looking forward to doing something a little better than I did the day before. I wanted to make me feel a little better. And sometimes it was just opening a door and smelling outside and looking at the birds and the bugs on the ground, just something to move forward. And I think a lot of women going through trauma or have been through trauma, they tend to want to isolate themselves because they feel bad that it happened to them. But they have to learn that they need to be good to themselves and take care and move on, take my baby steps and just move forward and get away from the thing that's terrifying them. And like I said, it takes a lot of people a lot of time to do that, but everyone has a strength in them. And if they pull that strength out, no one can take it away, but they have to learn how to use it. I used my strength a lot, and I did a lot, and it helped me to find who I was and that I was going to get over it.
Yes, and in addition to surviving, Ted Bundy and the lupus as a child, you've had other challenges like breast cancer. So I'm sure there's moments there where you kind of think, oh my God, something else, because it's a lot of things to happen in your life. So when you were diagnosed with breast cancer, how was that? Had you learned from the other experiences how to deal with it?
When I first was diagnosed, first thing was no chemo. I don't want chemo. I don't want to lose my hair again, but I had to have
Yeah.
chemo. And I didn't lose all my hair. I lost a lot of it. And I did feel that I wanted to get better for my husband. We hadn't been married very long, and for my son who was in fifth grade. And there was just so much to look forward. And I went through 9 months of chemo and had a mastectomy and had to learn to live with that. but it was just something I'd get through like everything else. And I wanted to move forward from it. It was a long haul, a long 9 months of sickness and chemo and people feeling sorry for me. That's the last thing I wanted, was to be felt sorry for. But I did recuperate. It's in remission, also is my lupus. And a couple of months later, my husband and I, Scott, decided we wanted to have a baby. So I got pregnant, and about 8 weeks into the pregnancy, I had a miscarriage. And
Oh,
that
no.
devastated me. I felt like I couldn't save my baby. I could go through anything and get through it, but I couldn't save my baby. So about 6 months after that, I got pregnant again, and we're so happy to have the baby. And then 12 weeks after the baby, I had another miscarriage. And again, I was tearing myself up inside, just thinking it was all my fault. And it wasn't. It was what happened to me. I didn't do anything to have the miscarriages, but I didn't want to dwell on it. So my husband and I moved on, and we decided to get a sailboat, and we called her Sally. And that became many years of sailing and happy times.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. And that you said one thing there, you have to just move on because using your analogy of the island and the baby steps, I mean, maybe that sailboat was taking you to the island or another island, but those islands and that sailboat really kind of helped your mental health, didn't they?
Yes, they did. I focused on that, but anyone can focus on anything else that they want to do and they want to feel happy. Just open the door, look at the bugs on the ground, and be happy that you're there to see them.
Right. And, before we finish, what I want to ask you is when Ted Bundy was executed, how did that feel for you? Did that feel like it was closing a chapter in your life or it had no significance?
It did. It was 10 years after the convention. And every couple of months, we'd think, well, now it's going to happen. And he'd get a stay of execution from a judge who thought he needed more time to appeal. And that happened like 4 times during the 10 years. So when I got a call in January in 1989 that he was actually going to be executed that day, the prosecutor and the people there in Tallahassee kept calling me and giving me updates. And the morning of the execution, about 3 in the morning, they said he's really gonna be executed at 6 this morning. And my husband and I woke up and went downstairs to watch it on TV. And there were protesters on each side, Fry Bundy, and the other side let him live. So we watched TV, and then when the execution happened, they called me and said it was over. And I sat on my sofa and I cried. And I cried. And my husband said I wailed. And I got it out of my system. And I wasn't crying for me. I was crying for the girls, for the women that he killed, for my sorority sisters, Margaret and Lisa. They didn't have those days of being killed. And I hurt for them. I dried my tears. I looked at my husband and I said, I'm hungry. I want to go to breakfast. So that's the day of the execution.
Wow. And, I had mentioned it did it close a chapter, and it probably did in some ways, but the great thing was it opened another chapter when you wrote your book. And, it's a magnificent book. And how do you hope your story will impact readers of your memoir?
I think by hearing my story and possibly reading how I actually went through it and that I did it because I wanted to do it, that might give them strength to hold on to handle what they're going through, either currently or in the past, their trauma, that their trauma is as bad as it can be to them. And each of mine were terrible for me. It affected me and my family, but I didn't want to live in a box. I needed to get out and be better. And there was so much to do in life. I just wanted to go forward and couldn't wait for the next thing and the next day. So I hope women need to know to be good to themselves and to get through it and to go forward and be healthy and feel good.
Okay, Kathy, it's been wonderful to talk to you. And can you just tell us, after such a fantastic book and, you've had a crazy life. I mean, it's been up and down because you've learned to find happiness amongst all those dark moments. And the title of your book, A Light in the Dark, that really is what happened. You've managed to find the light, whether it's on your island or just looking ahead, you've managed to find that light. So what's next for you? Are there projects or goals you're looking forward to?
Yes, actually, in South Florida, we had a big hurricane, Ian, and we had bought our new sailboat about 4 months before Ian, and Ian took it away from us. She broke away from the pier and she ended up floating in the Gulf of Mexico, which is way away, but she didn't sink because her damage was above the boat line. So we lost her, and it wasn't long, with less than a year, we bought another sailboat. And she was beautiful. She was the boat of our dreams. And this past year, we had a hurricane called Milton, and Milton took our boat away. She sank. Sailing was all we wanted to do in our lives. We had talked about it the whole time. We've been together 37 years, and that's always been our goal. So right now we're out looking for another boat. So we hope to go sailing again after all.
Well, I hope you find your boat. And when they say third time is the charm, maybe the next one will be much better. But I want to thank you for coming on the Collective Whisper podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm sorry for those dark things that happened in your life. But, I want to congratulate you on finding that light that has helped you to live and survive and be who you are and spread the message. So well done for that. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. I appreciate talking to you.
Lovely talking to you. Kathy Kleiner, everybody. Thank you very much, Kathy Kleiner. That was wonderful to hear your story and to hear it in your words rather than the narrative that other media outlets and papers and magazines spread. It was a harrowing experience for you, but you've come through it on the other side. And now you can teach people and spread the word and let people understand victims' trauma. And in this case, we look at Ted Bundy as being a famous man, kind of glorified sometimes in the media's eyes, but in fact, he was a cold-blooded killer. So more should be spoken of about the victims and not the perpetrators. So we want to thank you once again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. We wish you the best of luck with everything in the future. Kathy Kleiner. And to you, the listeners, thank you very much for listening to the podcast once again. My name is Simon Kay. I want to wish you guys all the best. And until the next time, look after your friends, your family, and everyone you love. Bye-bye.